Tom's voice was gentle, but there was an insistence beneath it that made my skin prickle. "It's just for tax purposes," he said, watching me carefully. "You always talk about being smart with our finances. This is the best move for our family." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the edge of the papers he had placed on the counter. Something about this didn't sit right. Tom and I had been married for 4 years, and while we'd had our fair share of disagreements, this felt different. His words seemed logical on the surface, but deep down, something felt off. He reached for my hand, a gesture that once would have reassured me, but tonight, his touch felt unfamiliar. His fingers didn't wrap around mine the way they used to, and there was a slight tremor in his grip. I glanced down at the house transfer documents, my heart pounding against my ribs. The official letterhead stared back at me, cold and impersonal. Upstairs, our 2-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, were finally asleep after a long, exhausting day, and here I was, standing in our beautiful kitchen, the very one I had renovated myself, being asked to sign away the biggest investment of my life. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Tom, I don't know. This house, it's my security. I bought it before we were even married." As soon as I said the words, I saw something flicker across his face. Was it anger, frustration? Whatever it was, he quickly masked it, replacing it with a look of patient understanding. But now that I had seen it, I couldn't unsee it. "If you really cared about our marriage, you'd understand why this makes sense," he said, pushing the papers a little closer to me. His voice was soft, but there was an underlying sharpness that hadn't been there before. "Between your crazy hospital hours and your constant exhaustion, I'm the one holding this family together." The words stung. I looked over at the baby monitor on the counter, where a soft blue glow showed my twins sleeping peacefully. They had my dark curls and olive skin, their tiny faces identical to mine. They were the reason I worked long hours at the hospital, not because of ambition, but because I wanted them to have everything they needed. I pulled my hand away from Tom's grasp. "I need time to think about this." That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tom's words played over and over in my mind, but something else was nagging at me, a quiet voice, a warning I couldn't ignore. Over the past few months, Tom had been different. He'd been coming home late, saying work was keeping him busy. He'd started going to the gym again, dressing sharper, constantly checking his phone. At first, I had brushed it off. People change, jobs get stressful, life shifts. But now, with this sudden pressure to sign over my house, I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut. The next morning, as I rushed around the kitchen packing the twins' daycare bags, Tom casually mentioned, "I dropped your jacket off at the dry cleaners. You can thank me later." His words were light, almost playful, but there was something forced about his smile. He barely glanced up from his phone, his fingers moving quickly over the screen. Just 6 months ago, he would have been here helping with the twins, making sure I ate a decent breakfast before my shift. Something wasn't right. Later that day, between patients at the hospital, I called my friend Nina. She worked in real estate law and had a sharp instinct for shady dealings. "Caitlin, transferring the house to his name alone wouldn't give you any tax benefits," she said after I explained everything. "If anything, it would complicate things since you bought it before marriage." My stomach twisted. I had been so caught up in work and the kids that I hadn't even thought to question the logic behind it. Tom had counted on that, hadn't he? Counted on me being too busy, too exhausted, to look deeper. "Listen to me carefully," Nina continued, her voice lowering. "Don't sign anything. I don't want to scare you, but I've seen this before. Men don't push for property transfers unless they're planning something." That single sentence sent a chill through me. That afternoon, when I had a spare moment, I did something I had never done before. I checked our phone records. Tom had been making frequent calls to the same number for months. My hands trembled as I did a reverse lookup, and a name appeared, Destiny Martinez. A quick social media search led me to a stunning woman in her mid-20s. Her posts were full of gym selfies, expensive dinners, and check-ins at trendy spots. And then I saw it, a post from 2 weeks ago, standing in front of a real estate office, smiling brightly. "Big changes coming, new chapter, #blessed. My chest tightened. That night, I left work early for the first time in months. Instead of picking up the twins, I drove straight to a discreet electronics store Nina had recommended. The elderly man behind the counter barely blinked when I explained what I needed. "Protect yourself," he said simply, showing me how to use the tiny recording device. "The best evidence is in their own words." When I got home, I set it up in the kitchen and started dinner, keeping my movements casual. When Tom walked in, he looked surprised to see me there. "No emergencies at the hospital?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. I turned to face him, smiling. "I thought we could talk more about the house transfer. I've been thinking about what you said." His face lit up with barely concealed triumph. "I knew you'd come around. You're making the right choice. This is what's best for our family." The way he emphasized family made my skin crawl. Over dinner, I let him talk, let him spin his web of lies. Each word was carefully measured, each reason lined up perfectly. He thought he was winning. After putting the twins to bed, I sat in their dim nursery, watching them sleep. Emma clutched her stuffed giraffe. Ethan's blanket lay in a heap beside him, looking at their peaceful faces. A deep, protective rage burned inside me. Tom thought he had me cornered. He thought I wouldn't question, wouldn't fight back. He had no idea who he was dealing with. A week later, Tom brought home the final transfer papers. "Just your signature," he said smoothly, "then we can put this all behind us." I picked up the pen, holding it over the signature line. He watched me, his body tense with anticipation. His phone buzzed on the counter, and I saw Destiny's name flash across the screen. I put the pen down. "Actually," I said, meeting his gaze, "I think we need to talk about Destiny first." The color drained from his face. For the first time in this entire ordeal, Tom looked scared. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was war. And I was ready. I saw guilt flash across his face, but it wasn't the kind of guilt that came from remorse or regret. No, it was the guilt of a man who had been caught red-handed and knew he had run out of excuses. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, a way to twist the situation to his advantage. "You don't understand," he started, his voice slipping into the smooth, persuasive tone he used when handling difficult clients at work. "Things between us haven't been good for a long time. You're always at the hospital, working late nights, and the twins barely even know you." My blood boiled at his words. He was trying to shift the blame onto me, trying to make me feel guilty for doing what was necessary for our family, but I wasn't about to let him rewrite history. "Don't you dare," I cut him off sharply, my voice low but laced with cold fury. "Don't you dare use our children as an excuse for what you've done. I work hard to give them a future. What's your excuse for destroying their present?" Tom's face twisted with frustration. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor, his fists clenched, his face reddening. "You think you're so clever, don't you? The brilliant doctor, always one step ahead, but you have no idea what it's like living in your shadow, being the guy who married up. Destiny appreciates me, she understands." I scoffed. "Oh, I'm sure she understands plenty, like how you're trying to take the house I bought before I even met you, the house where our children took their first steps." His jaw tightened. "Our lawyer said." "Your lawyer," I corrected him sharply, "the one you've been secretly meeting with behind my back. Na warned me about him. He has a reputation for helping men hide assets before a divorce." Tom's face went pale. "You talked to Na?" I nodded, letting my silence confirm the worst of his fears. Then, I pulled out a stack of documents, bank statements, phone records, and emails I had recovered. I tossed them onto the table, watching his eyes widen as he skimmed through the damning evidence. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? That I'd just sign away my children's home because you batted your eyes and mentioned taxes?" The baby monitor crackled, and the soft cries of our twins filled the room. Ethan had woken up, his tiny whimpers soon joined by Emma's. Tom instinctively moved toward the stairs, but I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Don't bother," I said coldly. "I'll take care of our children. You can take care of explaining to Destiny why her new future isn't quite as glamorous as she planned." As I headed upstairs, I heard his phone ping, probably Destiny, wondering why her knight in shining armor was running late. Let her wonder. I had more important things to focus on, like protecting my children's future from the man who was supposed to help me build it. "This isn't over," Tom shouted after me as I reached the top of the stairs. "You're making a huge mistake." I turned to look down at him from the landing, meeting his desperate gaze with unwavering confidence. "No, Tom, the mistake was thinking I wouldn't fight back." The next morning, Tom was gone. I didn't need to ask where he had spent the night. Destiny's apartment was the only place he had left. As I got the twins ready for daycare, my phone buzzed with a message from Na. "He's been to see his lawyer, time to move fast." I was ready. During my lunch break, I met with James Cooper, the divorce attorney Na had recommended. His office was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment of the hospital where I spent most of my days. Dr. Wilson, James said, scanning the evidence I had compiled. I have to say, I'm impressed. Most clients come to me after the damage is done. You've given us everything we need to stay ahead. I had good instincts, I said simply. Better than good, he corrected, a hint of admiration in his voice. These recordings and documents are clear proof of intent to commit fraud. Judges don't take kindly to premeditated asset hiding. As we discussed our strategy, my phone lit up with frantic messages from Tom. We need to talk. You're being unreasonable. Think about the twins. James glanced at my phone and smirked. He's realizing his plan is falling apart. Be prepared, this is when they usually get desperate. He was right. That evening, Tom came storming into the kitchen, his carefully crafted charm completely gone. You think you're so smart, he sneered. You've ruined everything. Destiny and I could have handled this maturely. We would have let you stay in the guest house, kept things civil for the kids. I couldn't help but laugh. The guest house? In my own home? Our home, he shouted, making Emma jump in her high chair. I've lived here for 4 years. Ethan, sensing the tension, scrunched up his little face. Dada mad? I gently stroked his hair. Dada's just tired, and Dada's leaving for a while. Tom's anger faltered. Like hell I am. I pulled out another document from my bag and slid it across the table. This is a temporary restraining order. My lawyer filed it this morning after your threatening messages. You have 1 hour to pack. Tom's face drained of color. You can't do this. I met his eyes, my voice steady. I already did. And Tom, Destiny's welcome to you, but this house, the one you tried to steal from our children, that's mine, and if you think I won't fight for it, you never really knew me at all. An hour later, I watched from the nursery window as he packed his bags into his car, his shoulders hunched in defeat. He kept looking back, as if he still couldn't believe how spectacularly his plan had failed. Bye-bye? Emma asked softly. I hugged her close, inhaling the comforting scent of baby shampoo. Yes, sweetheart, Daddy's going bye-bye for a while. In the following weeks, Tom waged war through the courts, demanding half of everything, including the house. But James was prepared. When we presented the evidence of his fraud, the judge ruled in my favor. Then, the real blow came. A forensic accountant uncovered something worse. Tom had been embezzling from his firm to fund his extravagant dates with Destiny. When his employer found out, they pressed charges. Destiny, suddenly uninterested in a man facing criminal charges, dumped him via text. One night, he showed up at the house, drunk and pathetic. You did this to me, he slurred, waving his phone around. I called the police. As they led him away, I felt a strange mix of relief and pity. Had he always been this man, or had I just been too blind to see it? Either way, he was out of our lives, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free.